Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Managing Up. During this webinar, we hope you will learn how to develop and craft a more productive working and communication style. This session will cover topics related to working better with your supervisor, other staff members, stakeholders, volunteers, community groups, etc. This is a skill you will likely need now and in your future, regardless of your career path. I'm your host, Molly Pelzer from the VISTA Training Unit. Assisting me today off screen are our partners Amy Kanata from Education Northwest and Sam Graziani from JBS International. You'll see us in the chat and the Q&A to assist you during today's session and to help get your questions answered. We're delighted to have with us Kapila Wewegama. Kapila serves as an independent management and training consultant as well as facilitator and has worked with the Corporation for National and Community Service, Peace Corps, and other nonprofit organizations. He is part of the VISTA Supervisor Orientation Training Team. We will also feature two VISTA Leader guest speakers today, Kristen Holden from Our House in Arkansas and Tony Dondero from the Colorado Nonprofit Development Center in Denver. We'll learn more about them a little later on. Now I'll provide a snapshot of what we'll cover today, and then I will pass it over to Kapila. So here are the goals for the Managing Up webinar today. After this webinar, you should be able to define Managing Up, as well as identify essential elements of Managing Up, and identify methods to effectively manage up. I'm excited you're here with us today, but now I would like to turn it over to Kapila. Kapila?
Thank you, Molly. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So during this session, we are going to focus on 5 important questions in relation to managing up. First, we will look at what is managing up. Then we will ask ourselves why managing up is important and what are the benefits. Third, we will examine what are the essential elements of managing up and how do we meet them. Next, we will identify what not to do in managing up, and finally, we will explore what are some relevant resources on the VISTA campus. During our conversations, we will also have the great opportunity to hear from 2 VISTA leaders about their experience in relation to managing up. At the end of our session, you will have the opportunity for Q&A. So, let's begin our discussion with the question, what is managing up? We would like each one of you to think about what comes to your mind when you think of the term or the concept of managing up. You can write down your thoughts on a piece of paper or make mental notes. So let's take 30 seconds. Great. So as you can imagine, there are so many ways individuals define this term or this concept. We would like to share one definition from the field that we think fairly captures the core focus of managing up.
Managing up is the process of consciously working with your boss to obtain the best possible results for you, your boss, and your organization. This is not a political maneuvering or kissing up. Rather, it is a deliberate effort to bring understanding and cooperation to relationship between individuals who often have different perspectives. This is according to Thomas J. Zuber, MD, and Erica H. James, PhD.
Thank you, Molly. So as you heard and also you can see on the screen, the key focus of managing up is to work effectively with your boss to bring the best outcomes for you, your boss, your project, and for your organization. So let's see how many of your definitions you had thought earlier seem to match with this definition that we have shared. So please choose yes or no using the function on the screen that appears on the bottom right column of your WebEx window.
Copy that. It looks like there are quite a few green check marks. We also have a couple no's peppered in there as well.
Great. Thank you, Amy. So as Amy pointed out from your responses, it looks like most of your thinking captured the key aspects of this definition. So that's a great start. So with that, now we are going to take a moment to ask ourselves why managing up is important as a VISTA member and what are the benefits. First, let's do a quick checking to see how many of you currently have specific strategies to manage up. We are going to do a quick activity to gauge your experience using the annotation tool. So the three forms, the responses that you can choose from is, the first is, yes, I have specific strategies I use currently. No, I don't have specific strategies I use currently. Or I'm not sure that I use specific strategies currently, but I'm interested learning more. So how you are going to respond to that, as you can see, the pen annotation tool that's on the upper left. So click on the blue marker icon to open your annotation toolbar, then choose the pen tool to make your dot directly on the slide. Great. Thank you. So as you all can see from the slide, that it looks like we have a lot of you who are currently using strategies to manage up, and that is great news because this will give all of us the opportunity to learn from your expertise and experience as we go through this conversation. And then also we have some of our colleagues who also identify that they may not necessarily using any specific strategies or techniques at this point, or maybe they are not sure, but they are interested learning. So thank you again for taking a moment to share your current experience. So next, we invite those of you who have indicated that you are currently using strategies for managing up to write down one or two specific strategies you use. Again, you can write them on a piece of paper or make mental notes. So let's take another 30-second reflection time.
And this is actually an activity where we are welcome to have you put your responses into the chat function. So you can use the chat function. Make sure your responses go to all participants. We'd love to hear you. What are some of the benefits of managing up? And maybe you've experienced that already as a VISTA member. So it might be a better working relationship with your supervisor, might be better communication styles, etc. But we would love to hear from you now, so feel free to use the chat box as well. And we'll wait just a minute. We've got some responses coming in. William says that active listening and reframing is a good benefit, absolutely. Weston says being prepared, respecting supervisors' time and space. Linda says another benefit is checking in daily to recap issues and review anything that's pending. Let's see, Ben says stronger communication. Rusty says weekly meetings, confirming goals and priorities. Dominique says more open and honest line of communication and clear expectations. I'm happy to see that word, expectations. Let's see, Amanda has another, clear expectations. Emily says it helps to be seen as an equal, which is great. Let's see, it's imperative to our ability to complete our projects and whether there are any challenges during our VISTA year. And let's see, Abigail says CCing your supervisor on emails to community partners, always a good idea to keep them in the loop. And we'll read Shannon's, and then I think we've got most of them. Agreeing on specific deadlines for projects during the weekly check-in. So that's great. Copy that. Looks like we've had a number of good responses.
Thank you, Molly. So let's take a look at some of the key benefits of managing up that generally people seem to identify who actually have very specific techniques and strategies. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. And as we look at the next slide, you will see what are some of these common benefits that people have expressed or identified. So let's look at the one is establishing mutual understanding of the project process and outcomes. And as you can see, most of these you had already mentioned, which is a great outcome, with what Molly has highlighted before. And another benefit is to receive helpful ongoing guidance and feedback from our supervisors. So that's the second benefit. And the third is minimizing misinterpretations and miscommunications. So a lot of people identify this as one of the great benefits of having very specific ways of strategies to managing up, and then benefiting from each other's strengths, knowledge, skills, and expertise. Focusing on and attending to project priorities. As we go through this conversation, you will see how these benefits also relate to what we should be really focusing on. And then finally, creating a respectful and supportive working relationship. So these are some of the general benefits that mostly been identified, which really connects with what some of our colleagues have shared before. Okay, so far we have looked at the definition of managing up, what are some of the benefits. Now, let's examine the essential elements of managing up. So our review of current materials and literature in the subject matter of managing up points out to 6 essential elements. So what we are going to do, we will take 3 elements at a time. We will see what those are. We will talk about them, and then also you will have, as we are doing this, have the opportunity to share any current strategies or techniques that you may be using in relation to the 3 that we have been looking at a given time. And at the end of the 3, Molly will again help us to highlight some of the ideas or techniques or strategies shared through the chat function. So the first, agree upon realistic expectations. The second, understand and respect work styles and priorities. Third, recognize and capitalize on strengths. So let's take a moment to examine what do these pieces really mean. And then again, as we are doing this, please use the chat function and share your expertise that relates to these different elements. So number 1, agree upon realistic expectations. This is about identifying and sharing each other's expectations with your supervisor, which should be one of the first things that we do with our supervisor. The expectations that we have of each other, we have with our supervisors, they should be realistic and both parties should agree on them. So one very specific tool that we can use for this purpose is our WAD. Number 2, understand and respect work styles and priorities. It is so very important and will effectively serve both you and your supervisor when you have identified and discussed your work style. For example, if you know that one aspect of your supervisor's work style is to use a micromanagement approach, it will help you to understand when your supervisor provides very detailed, specific instructions, why he or she is doing that. Otherwise, we can have a misinterpretation, not knowing that our supervisor has a micromanagement style. We can think, oh, my supervisor is having lack of trust in my ability to carry out the assignment. Also, understanding each other's priorities is extremely important. When you clearly know your supervisor's priorities, you can focus your energy, your time, and resources to address what's most important to the supervisor, to the project, and organization. And number 3, recognize and capitalize on your strengths. As we know, today there is great focus and emphasis on using one's strengths. Mostly, this is promoted among leaders, managers, and supervisors to identify and utilize their employees' strengths. However, at the same time, it is equally important, especially in this subject matter of managing up, that employees, in our case, we as VISTA members, recognize and utilize our supervisor's strengths in accomplishing our project goals. As you can imagine, we can only do this if we know what our supervisor's strengths are. So that's why having a respectful and effective relationship and good communication is so very, very important. So let's see, Molly, if you could highlight what you had got through the chat for those 3 before we go to the next.
Sure. So we have a couple responses coming in. Ben recommends asking for a clear list of priorities. Don't assume that you know. Emily, in regards to number 2, says that she is very honest about what she needs, which is great. Deandra says clear communication when tasked with something you are not familiar with or particularly skilled at, which is also very important. And Russell recommends for number 1, define what the expectations are and what they are not, which I think is also very important. It looks like those are the majority of the items that came into us for the first 3 essential elements.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you so very much for those of you who have taken the time and been very generous about sharing those very practical and very useful techniques. So we invite you to continue to do that with our next 3 as well. So let's take a look at our next, the remaining 3. Number 4, maintain open and respectful communication. Number 5, build and keep trust and rapport. And finally, number 6, approach with positive attitude. So again, let's examine what those are and use this time also to share your expertise, experience in relation to these 3 elements through the chat function. So number 4, maintain open and respectful communication. As we all know, communication is the bridge to relationship. When we establish and maintain a communication mechanism that is open, transparent, agreed upon, and respectful, It allows us to have any type of conversation efficiently and easily, no matter whether it is formal, casual, or difficult. Looking at number 5, build and keep trust and rapport. Now, this essential element of managing up considered to be one that takes time, patience, and perseverance, as trust is to be earned and it takes a while. So one major way we can build trust is by consistently demonstrating to the supervisor that we can meet the expectations and carry out our responsibilities efficiently and effectively, and keep up with the promises and commitments that we have made. Although we know it is going to take some time to build a higher level of trust, once it is in place, our supervisors are more willing to listen to and accommodate our ideas, suggestions, and recommendations. And finally, approach this positive attitude. This is where an employee, in our case, as a WISPA member, we become an asset to the supervisor in overcoming difficulties and challenges to accomplish project success. One way positive attitude is demonstrated by trying to see the half-filled part of the glass and approaching issues and challenges by becoming part of the solution, not the problem. So when you examine literature on leadership, almost all the leadership models and theories point out to positive attitude as one of the key attributes of effective workers as well as of effective leaders. So this is the can-do attitude. So let's see what Molly has been able to capture from what is being shared from all of you for these three.
Yeah, thank you. We have some good information and tips coming in. I'm going to start at let's see, where am I going to go? Let's see. So we have, first of all, communicate positives as well as problems, just in general for this section. For number 5, Travis recommends keeping to commitments in a timely way. Coworkers trust you to be on time and value the meeting, which is really on target and appropriate. Russell says for number 4, evaluate ideas, not those expressing the ideas, which I think is key. And Weston has a really simple recommendation to eat a complete breakfast every day if possible, which I think we sometimes probably skip and just drink lots of coffee. Emily says that for 4, 5, and 6, be respectful at all times and don't take criticism personally, which is very on target as well. For number 5, Ben recommends do what you'll say you'll do. Absolutely. Let's see, and keep going for a few more. Alyssa says to admit mistakes and misunderstandings, move forward from them positively. And Rebecca says, number 5, don't always talk business. Ask them how they are doing personally to develop that relationship. Let's see, we have good recommendations. One last one from Annie is to stay focused on the vision before you.
Thank you, Molly. So as, again, we heard from Molly, these are some very concrete, simple, practical things that we all can adopt as WISPA members, and these are coming from our own colleagues. So thank you again for each one of you who took the time to share your wisdom and expertise, and we are hoping you are taking notes for those of you who can adopt these techniques to your own situation. And thank you, Molly. And with that, I will turn it over to Molly to continue with the next piece.
Thank you, Kapila, for helping us define managing up and also working through how important those 6 essential elements are. Now I am very excited to welcome our guest speakers, Kristen Holden and Tony Dondero. Kristen and Tony are both VISTA leaders and part of an action learning team focusing on a project very similar to today's webinar. Kristen will speak first about how what she has developed with regards to managing up in her toolkit. And then Tony will share how she coached VISTAs to talk with their supervisor about refocusing their VADs. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kristen. Welcome, Kristen.
Hello. So my organization, which is a comprehensive program for working homeless and near homeless, teaches all of our VISTAs about managing up during their on-site orientation. So one of the first things that we ask them to do after that is to set a regular meeting time with their supervisors. For me, I meet with my supervisor once a week, and my supervisor and I both understand that sometimes our meetings may have to be moved or canceled due to other circumstances, but both of us try to keep that meeting time. And then there's a time limit to our meeting. So in our case, we try to stay right at that 30-minute time mark. And then we make sure to go ahead and communicate throughout the week via email or phone calls. But this once-a-week check-in allows us time to talk about progress of the projects I'm working on and future projects that either of us are thinking about. So I have a process that I complete to prepare for our weekly meetings. So the first thing I do is I keep a to-do list because being a VISTA can be very busy, so the to-do list just kind of helps me not forget anything. And I can check things off as I need to. And then after each of my weekly meetings, I go back and add to my to-do list, or if there's something that comes up during the week, I add that. And then my organization uses the tool that's just popped up on your screen to guide each supervisor and VISTA meeting. So the day before the meeting, I sit down and I fill out the questions using my to-do list. And it's a way to make sure that I'm touching in with my supervisor about the projects I'm working on and the projects either of us are thinking of. And then if you look at questions 2 and 3, it ensures I'm thinking about and working on capacity building and sustainability, which are important parts of the VISTA mission. And then finally, on question 4, it's my chance to ask my supervisor for anything that I need. For example, if I have a question that I don't know the answer to, this is my chance to have it answered. So the process of managing up, especially using these tools, helps me be more productive and helps my supervisor keep tabs on what I'm doing. We understand each other's needs and styles and can work together better. And finally, because if it's a discussion, it helps us to avoid miscommunications and misunderstandings. Thanks for listening, and I hope that this example was helpful. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tony.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Dondero, and I'm one of 2 VISTA leaders at the Colorado Nonprofit Development Center. My co-leader and I oversee 14 VISTA members throughout Denver, and our main role is to offer support and resources to VISTA members when struggling with their service. So 2 VISTA members that I oversee in my role, Jamie and Joe, work at a sub-site of the Colorado Nonprofit Development Center. Jamie's VAD is focused on outreach and recruitment for their employment skills training class that her site offers to low-income youth. But she noticed after a few months that most of her time was being spent on processing intake paperwork for this training program and the applicants rather than getting more people to apply and being out in the community recruiting. The other VISTA at the site, Joe, has just started recently as a VISTA and has been helping Jamie with the intake process rather than focusing on his VAD activities. So Jamie and Joe started to feel like they weren't really making an impact as much as they could at their site as VISTAs because they were spending so much time on the intake paperwork. So they reached out to me as their VISTA leader and asked me to join them in a planning meeting to brainstorm how they could alleviate some of these intake responsibilities and get back on track with their VADs so that they could focus on building capacity for their site. In our meeting, Jamie and Joe shared with me that their current intake process and how that works. We brainstormed who else at the organization could help out with the intake paperwork and created reasoning behind why they needed to focus their efforts on recruitment and outreach. So after our meeting, Jamie and Joe created a PowerPoint presentation with flowcharts and set up a time to meet with their supervisor to address the proposed changes, and they also invited me to sit in on this meeting with them just for support. So at this meeting with their supervisor, it went very smoothly, and the presentation really demonstrated clearly to the supervisor how much stronger of an impact they could make if their time was spent out in the community getting more low-income youth to apply to the program rather than spending their time on paperwork. And I just really feel like this process is a great testimonial to how managing up techniques can make a better work environment for yourself as a VISTA, provide better results for your supervisor, and a stronger, sustainable impact for your organization. And now over to Molly, who's going to share one more example about managing up to build collaboration. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tony, and also thanks to Kristen. It's wonderful when we can have voices from our VISTA community join us. And it's important to keep in mind with regards to managing up that it's not only related to the relationship with your supervisor, your manager, your director, or your other coworkers. We're going to shift gears just a bit, and I'm going to share an example of how managing up might impact you outside of your office in the community. Much of the work done by VISTA members during their service includes working with coalition, building consensus among stakeholders, and everyone probably represents a very diverse interest and background. So I recently had the opportunity to interview a VISTA member currently serving in the mayor's office as part of a Strong Cities, Strong Communities initiative. This initiative, the Strong Cities, Strong Community, helps communities hardest hit by the recession by coordinating federal investments to create stronger cooperation to spark economic growth. AmeriCorps VISTA members play a key role in this initiative by improving the city's capacity to coordinate its efforts and serve its most economically disadvantaged residents. So within this project, one goal of the members' VAD was to develop strategic partnerships to address and alleviate poverty. Sounds great, on target with VISTA. And the VISTA actually was able to build off what he learned at PSO, and he shared some key points that he kept in mind while forming this coalition as part of his service. So as we talk through these, you'll see that all of the 6 essential elements of managing up that we've discussed earlier in the presentation are represented. So first, establishing a strong foundation. He mentioned that it's very important to establish a good work ethic, which has also come through in the comments. And this reflects positively on you as well as your organization. So start off on the right foot and be known for all that you can do, not what you cannot do. A good reputation will also help establish trust within your organization, the community, your volunteers, any potential resources you might be investigating, etc. Second, leverage and grow your networks. To start building a group or to add to a current group, remember to leverage your networks as well as the networks of your project or your sponsor. Be open to collaborating with the unlikely or maybe even unconventional partners, and be sure to respect different work styles as well as competing interests. Additionally, don't be afraid to reach outside your current networks and ensure the right parties and interests are represented. Don't overlook an organization just because they aren't already part of your network. Third, identify roles and interests. Be sure to identify the various roles and interests represented by the group members. It's really important to understand why people are part of the group. So don't be afraid to ask the question, what do they have to offer, or what do they have at stake? Take care to recognize and capitalize on the strengths while searching for ways to overcome and improve anything that might be a weak point. Number 4, be realistic. Even if the professional interests overlap, you might not always easily reach consensus. So develop a plan and set realistic expectations and goals. Each office will operate at a different pace, and some individuals might not have as much time to focus on this issue as other group members. So be realistic when considering everything from how frequently meetings are set to how long they are, where they take place, etc. Those situations will impact the overall project timeline and ultimately the progress that you're trying to make. Finally, and this was a big one that I talked about at length with the VISTA candidate member, but it's important to understand that this will take time. Throughout his service, this VISTA learned that building partnerships will take time, and strong communication skills are essential in keeping that partnership moving forward. It can be frustrating or slow-moving at times, but you must maintain open and respectful communication and approach the process with patience as well as a positive attitude. So I hope that these three perspectives we just shared from our VISTA leaders and also a current member give you some insight on why managing up is important and how it will be important now as well as in your future career. So now we're going to switch gears again, and Kapila will share things for us to avoid while attempting to manage up. Kapila?
Thank you, Molly. And thanks to Christine, Tony, and again Molly for sharing 3 fine examples of managing up from the field, and also for sharing a few practical tools and strategies as well. So, as Molly pointed out, it is also important that we take a few minutes to identify the kind of behaviors and activities that could hinder our ability to work with our supervisors to obtain the best possible results for us, our supervisor, our project, and our organization. Now, some of these behaviors could be unconscious or unintentional. So let's use the chat function to hear some of your thoughts in relation to this question of what should be avoided when managing up. And then Molly will help us to summarize some of your thoughts.
Sure. And just another mention that we'd love to hear from you in the chat function about what to avoid when working through managing up. It looks like we have some responses coming in. Travis says you should avoid unorthodox power structures. Pamela says we should avoid assumptions, and Abigail says we should avoid overstepping their knowledge. And Ben puts it very plainly, avoid being bossy, which I think is also very important. So if you have another idea what should be avoided, feel free to put that in. We'll look at a few more. Brandy says that we should avoid mixing personal life and work life. Weston says we should don't be inappropriate, which is very appropriate to mention that. And Linda says keep all information confidential, which was something that we probably should do. So I think those are most of the responses, Kapila. I think we're ready to move ahead.
Great. Thank you, Molly. So again, based on the reviews and research we have done, these are some of the additional ones. Some of these you already mentioned. Some of them may be new information to some of you. So what they say, not to participate in the gossip mill, because that is one of the biggest traps that we can get caught in an organizational situation. Don't criticize your supervisor, organization, or project. I mean, we are there as their ambassadors. When I'm a VISTA member, I'm the ambassador of my supervisor, my organization, and my project. Don't participate in or contribute to office politics. Totally. Keep away from office politics. When we keep away from office politics, it demonstrates our professionalism. People start admiring us, respecting us for being very professional. Not to minimize our supervisor's position, role, or contribution, because our supervisor is our key partner in this project journey. So it's a collaboration. It's a great partnership. And finally, You heard this earlier too. Molly also talked about this. Some of you talked about this when we looked at strategies, not to promise what we cannot deliver. So in order to be able to do that, we have to be able to say no when we have to do that in a diplomatic, in an appropriate way. Because if we are not able to say no at times, we may take things on our plate that we might not be able to deliver. So these are a couple of things that's been suggested to avoid that will help us to be able to effectively manage up. And also, the other piece is, we might see some of our colleagues carrying out this behavior, so it's our role also to point out to our colleagues and say, bring it to their attention, because they may be doing those things unintentionally. Okay, and then our last focus question for this overall conversation is to look at what are some relevant resources on the VISTA campus. So we are going to show you a few examples from the VISTA Leaders section. We are going to take a live tour. As you can see, the browser will change and we will be on the campus. Great. So we are going to go and look at the Leaders section. And under the Leaders section, we are going to choose Becoming a Leader. And then once we are on Becoming Leader section, and then we are going to click on First Few Weeks as a VISTA Leader. And when you come here, you will see there is this Building Relationships subsection. When you click on it, it will open up 4 vcasts that you can watch and learn from. So let's click on one. And when you open the vcast, we are not going to play the vcast, but what we want to show you, once you open the section for a specific vcast, please also know that there are some very relevant additional resources listed under the vcast player. So once you have looked at the vcast, make sure that you also go and explore and examine what those additional resources are. And as you can see, this theme, establishing relationships, so well connected to managing up. And then the second piece that we would like to show again under the VISTA Leaders section. When you go to VISTA Leaders, if you go to the Action Learning, so you will go to the Action Learning subsection. And once you go there, you will see the Action Learning product. There is another subsection there. And when you open that subsection, these are some great tools, resources created by teams of VISTA Leaders. Again, very relevant to us because it's for us, for the VISTA population. So on this list, there are 2 pieces we want to bring to your kind attention. One is called the Effective VISTA Supervisor Relationship. So again, that directly, talks to our managing up conversation here. And the other one is the VISTA Training Self-Assessment Guide. Now, this particular resource will allow you or will provide you some assessment tools, communication, work styles, and other assessment tools that you can use individually to assess your communication preferences, work styles, etc. And so you can use it for your own self, and you can also use it with your supervisor or other stakeholders that you work with. So these tools will help you and the other parties to understand your own styles and to have a very meaningful conversation by sharing what those styles are of each other and how you could work together and how they can bring together to have the best results for everybody. So at this point, we are going to take a moment and invite you all to share any other resources that you think that you have used that relates to managing up, others could adapt. Please use the chat function, share the links at this point. They can be from the Vista campus because anytime when we share other resources we have used from the Vista campus, it's a great way of, informing, educating our colleagues about what's up there and how they might be able to use them, as well as if you have other resources from outside of the Vista campus, please feel free to share those links through the chat function as well. So let's take a moment, maybe about 30 seconds, and give our colleagues the opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the link, just at least if you can mention the specific name of the resource, if it is a Vista resource, that will also help some of our colleagues.
We have a few responses coming in already. Brandy recommends that we look on Prezi because there are a lot of great presentations made on many topics. Ben recommends a Strengths Finders Guide, which is another great recommendation. I'd encourage you all to take a minute to put your recommendations on what are some of your favorite resources or good guides or tools that would help you work through managing up, either again for any groups or organizations that you're working on or any coworkers, directors, etc. Emily says that she sometimes asks coworkers how to communicate with supervisors. It's always good to ask advice. Other people are definitely a great resource. And Brandy again recommends TED Talks as another type of presentation and access to another great volume of data and information, good tips and resources. Let's see if anyone else has anything else to add. Go ahead and add it in the chat box. Otherwise, let's see. We are going to probably just move back to you, Kapila.
Okay, thank you, Molly. And once again, thank you to those of you who took the time to share some of these great resources, ideas. And the next piece, we like to invite each one of you at this point to think about, reflect on the conversations that we had so far, and reflect on, some of the great techniques, ideas shared by your colleagues earlier, and the ideas, thoughts presented by our Vista leaders, and also Molly's example, and really ask yourself, so what do I want to do next in relation to managing up? Even if you are having current strategies in place, how can you boost that? How can you enhance what you are doing currently? If you don't have any concrete ways of doing things, what would be some ways to get started with that process? So think about it and at least, identify one or two specific ways to go about it. And as you can see, we are suggesting to add to your list, if that makes sense at this moment for you. One is to complete a self-assessment. Because again, as we have mentioned a couple of times, understanding our own work styles, communication preferences, and to be able to discuss those with our supervisors and other people, other stakeholders that we work with, helps a lot in managing up. So one specific tool that you can use is going to that Vista Leaders Action Learning Product section and using that training assessment resource. You will find a couple of things that you will be able to use for that. Another one, the next step, establish clear and realistic expectations with your supervisor. Now, for this purpose, you might have your own tool that you can adapt in your organization or the project. Also, if you are looking for new ways to do this, here's another example, what Tony presented earlier, the worksheet. Maybe that's something you can use as a starting point. And that worksheet will be available on the webinar section of the Vista Campus. When this recording is posted on the Vista Campus, those additional resources will be there. And then another next step that we would encourage you to think about, learn about your supervisor's strengths and identify ways to utilize it. And I have to tell you, this is one area I think most of us as Vista leaders can really work on, to really take the time to ask our supervisors, recognize what they bring to the table, and then really utilize them. Because by doing that, it will help so much for us to have a very meaningful professional and personal year of experience. So with that, I'm going to hand this over back to Molly for the next part of our webinar. Molly? Please.
Great. Thank you so much. While we get ready for the Q&A portion, you should now see an evaluation poll on the right side of your screen. Please take time to answer the questions in the poll. We like to be able to improve these webinars, and your input helps us with that process. So we've given you a lot to think about, and now it's time for your questions. You can ask a question using the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. If you can't see the Q&A panel, you can click on the Q&A button that I think is also at the top of your screen in the upper right-hand corner. Additionally, I will ask Giovanna, our operator, to come back in and remind us how we can ask questions via the phone as well.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question over the phone lines, please press *1. Be sure to record your name when prompted. If you wish to withdraw your question, you may press *2. Again, to ask a question, please press *1. Thank you.
Great. So we will take just a minute and wait for some questions to come in. Again, I'd like to remind you all to take some time to fill out the poll, to leave us your thoughts on the webinar. And also be sure to use the Q&A function via WebEx as opposed to the chat function. It's much easier for us to track the questions in the Q&A panel. You can ask questions of our leaders who are with us today, Tony and Kristen, and you can also ask Kapila some questions as well. So let's see if we have anything coming in. I don't see any questions coming in just yet. Giovanni, do we have any questions via the phone?
There are no questions at this time.
Okay. All right. We'll wait for just another minute. I hope that you all have found today's session helpful and useful. Kapila or Tony or Kristen, are there any final thoughts or any additional tips or tricks that you would like to share with our participants today?
Molly, I just want to again thank you, our two Vista leaders, for the great, the wisdom, experience that they shared with all of us. And thank you to all the participants for your interest, because for us, you joining this webinar is an indication that you care about this theme. So thank you to all of you also who shared, again, some great, very practical, adaptable strategies as well as techniques. So I just want to appreciate all that great sharing that was taking place, Molly. And thank you, Molly.
Sure, you're welcome. We do have a couple questions coming in online. The first one is about, talking a little bit more about leveraging. She isn't quite sure what that means. And I'll talk about it just briefly because I know that I mentioned leveraging networks. That came up during the interview of the member who is currently working with the Strong Cities, Strong Communities initiative. And the thing about networks is that they are constantly changing. There are people meeting people on a regular basis, new opportunities come up. So first of all, if you haven't started working within your networks that you have, maybe you are part of an alumni group, you can see if there's some like-minded individuals that would be able to work or assist you on a problem. There are also maybe networks of your organization. Are they part of any consortiums or community groups that you can tap into to assist with alleviating poverty and working on any goals towards your VAD? Would any of the other presenters like to add anything about how to leverage networks?
And to add to what you said, Molly, is one of the specific techniques I know some VISTA members use is something called the community mapping. Actually identifying, as you pointed out, what are some of the assets and the resources, people available in the community for the mission of addressing poverty, and really then being very proactive of reaching out and bringing their expertise and experience and talent to the project. So community mapping is one technique, and if you Google, there are a lot of documents that will suggest how one goes about doing community mapping, which is identifying resources in the community.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. We do have a bunch of questions coming in, which is wonderful. The first question we'll work with today is, my supervisor is not sure of what task or direction to give me at our meetings. How do I deal with this? Which one of our panelists would like to respond to this?
I would, one way I would go about doing that is, again, being proactive. And I also want to kindly remind all of ourselves, as Molly pointed out at the beginning, I get the opportunity to work with VISTA supervisors during their orientation. And a lot of VISTA supervisors have a lot of responsibilities on their plate. So sometimes because they are so very engaged, they may not necessarily have had the time to think about some of these pieces. So being proactive and reaching out to your supervisor and inviting or requesting for time to have a conversation, and then you can also suggest, these are few pieces that would help me. It will help me if we can, revisit the VAD and look at our, for me to learn about your expectations so that I know that I am addressing what's really important for the project and for the organization. So that, so kind of approaching, being proactive and reaching out would
Great.
be one way.
And would either of our leaders like to help or respond on how VISTAs can have a better relationship with their supervisor? Any additional nuggets to share? Okay. Well, we've got more questions coming in. Hannah would like to know, how am I supposed to be realistic about what I can get done in the year when meeting with the board when I barely know what's been done on a project and have no experience estimating how long certain activities will take me? Kapila, how would you recommend Hannah approach this and start developing a solution?
Yeah, once again, for me, first thing that comes to my mind is the VAD. Because whether, it is a very detailed VAD or not, just having the VAD is a great starting resource. So one way that I might approach, again, the supervisor, who is my first contact, is to have a thorough, detailed conversation about the VAD. But prior to having that conversation, I will take time and look at my VAD and specifically identify what are the questions that I will have for my supervisor that will help me to do a better job. and also help both myself and my supervisor to be able to realistically assess what needs to be done and then also have some realistic time frame. So if you can do that, then you have something that you can, share with the rest of the organization. In this case, I think, Molly, what I heard is the board. So even with the board members, you can, present it to them. And when it comes from both of your conversations and agreements, which means your supervisor, then the board is, more willing to accept it, and also it's going to be more realistic. And then again, as we have talked about during the process, that partnership comes into play, because then you are not on your own, because your supervisor is also a partner in that process. So that's one quick, strategy that comes to my mind, Molly.
Great. Thank you so much. Going to check in with our operator and see if we have any questions via the phone lines at this time.
There are no audio questions at this time. Again, if you would like to ask a question over the phone lines, please press *1.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple more questions in the Q&A function, and JG would like to know, how would you recommend gaining a vision for your strategic plan of utilizing volunteers at your organization? And JG, this is a pretty big question. I think as a place to start, to where you can start applying what we've been discussing in this Managing Up overview with, addressing this question, I think it's important to get the right players and the right people involved. So going back to building that consensus and collaboration and making sure that you have, all interests represented. It would be your volunteers would be involved in that, staff members, board members, etc. So making sure that you have the right people involved to start addressing that is appropriate. Yes, Kapila, go ahead.
Yes, if I may, and to add to that, Molly, I would also encourage, if you have not seen the copy of the overall VISTA action plan, that may be something that you may want to request, so you can really see what are the goals for the overall 3-year project, as well as then looking at the milestones for your specific project year, because you are, responsible for those milestones. They are written for the year. And also I would also look at what the current and the past mechanism using volunteers at the organization, what their successes and drawbacks have been, and to learn, to take whatever you can from that as you are, combining it to your strategic plan. So those are a couple of things. And then, of course, I know you all know this, but this is a great opportunity for us to, again, kindly remind all of you on the VISTA campus, there are some great resources specifically for this question about volunteer management, volunteer mobilization, and recruitment, all those different aspects, as well as, we have those online courses. One course is also very specifically focused on this as well. Thank you, Molly.
Great. Thank you for adding that important additional information. We have another question coming in, again, for any of our panelists. My supervisor is not as receptive to setting deadlines and following them. How do I deal with this? Let's see. So again, I'd invite our leaders to join us if they would like to, or Kapila, feel free to kick us off with how to attack this question.
Yeah, so once again, I know my first piece may not necessarily be totally relevant to the person who is asking the question because maybe he or she has tried to do this. And that is, once again, having the initial conversations with your supervisor, as we talked about in Managing Up, and coming to certain agreements in relation to expectations of each other. This is where one place we can be, again, proactive in setting some some agreements, so that way, when something is not working, you can come back to those agreements and gently remind each other. So that way you are revisiting something that you have mutually agreed upon. So it takes away for unnecessary, blaming or pointing finger at each other. Nobody get offended because you are looking at a tool. So that's one thing. And the second, again, as I said earlier, some of your supervisors are too busy. And also then, of course, there are different personalities, different ways people work. Again, learning about each other's styles and having a conversation can address that to a great extent. And also, we also want to realistically look at the fact for some of our supervisors, not all, this is their first supervisory experience, right? Because as you may know, that we see, and Molly can, we all see this, there are a lot of former VISTA members or leaders coming to the supervisor's orientation as a supervisor. So this is their first time as a supervisor. So they are likewise, you may have somebody who is new to this. So that's why reaching out and being a partner in that process, reaching out and, with an inviting approach, it will also allow maybe a new supervisor who may not necessarily have seen the importance of doing a certain thing, will get their attention as well.
Great. Thank you so much again, Kapila. We have another question from Rachel, and Rachel wants to know if it's normal to feel like you are in over your head midway through the term. You're getting ready to launch your ideas, but it's almost time to wrap up as well. And Rachel, first of all, we all feel your pain. A lot of us within the VISTA universe, and especially our bright, talented VISTA members, they're seen as doers, and so a lot of times, you're asked to do a lot. It's appropriate to set expectations again that are realistic, and to also make sure that you keep that communication open. And Abigail actually agrees with you that it's completely normal. Before I ask our presenters to weigh in on this, I will encourage you all to attend one of our upcoming webinars related to project sustainability. We talk a little bit about the different roles of the members and also the supervisors. So that might be something to give you a little breathing space and take a step back and reevaluate how things are being done so that you don't feel so overwhelmed, because the VISTA world is here to support you. It's not just you as a member. It's us at headquarters. It's the state office members. It's also your supervisors, etc. So would any of our speakers like to respond to offer any additional advice about how our members can stop feeling so overwhelmed?
I would kindly invite Christine or Tony. You have gone through this journey. You see this happening all the time as a VISTA leader with your members. So if one of you are willing to share your thoughts, I think that would be great.
This is Kristen. I could chime in just a little bit. I feel like it is definitely normal to feel a little bit over your head. And one of the things that I think is really helpful is, like, as you get started, also be thinking about, like, the VISTA who's going to come after you, and, like, make sure that you've set things up so that they can, like, pick up where you've had to left off, and then they can continue this project that you've started building.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I think it's really good and really important to hear that from a Vista leader who has worked through this, I'm sure, before. I'm going to check in with our operator again to see if we might have any questions via the phone.
Currently, there are no questions on the phone lines.
Okay. Well, I think we have answered most of our questions via the Q&A function. It was a really great discussion, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and I would like to invite you to join an upcoming webinar dedicated to AmeriCorps Vista 50th anniversary to make poverty history in your community. Join us to hear about what is involved in planning an AmeriCorps Vista 50th related event, because these events aim to bring visibility to anti-poverty work and focus on the need to identify innovative and lasting solutions to poverty. Understand how these events can help bring visibility to your organization as well as to AmeriCorps Vista. Plus, you can see your connection with those who have served through the last 5 decades and identify how you can be involved in building the vision for Vista in the years to come. So, as we always say, you can check the webinars for Vista page on the Vista campus to register for this and other upcoming learning opportunities. And in about a week or so, we will have this webinar as well as the associated tools and resources available on the campus as well. I want to really thank all of our presenters and all of our attendees for joining us today, and I encourage you all to continue to have a great year of service. Thank you so much.